You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. Welcome to the podcast. We have on an awesome guest today. You will not believe this. We have on the screenwriter from Sleepless in Seattle, Geoff Arch. Geoff, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. This is great. It's a pleasure.
Oh, this is such a treat to have you. So, confession, I actually watched Sleepless in Seattle a couple nights ago with the wife, and we really enjoyed it. You know, I know it came out a little while ago, but it's still a great rom-com. And if you could real quick, just kind of give us the origin story of that script and what inspired you to write it and then the process of getting it to screen.
Well, frustration and desperation inspired me to write it. I think it was my fourth or fifth script. And
okay.
The earlier ones, they each got better. You know, my message to writers is, look, the only thing you can do is get better. The only thing you have any kind of control over in this whole thing is getting better yourself as a writer.
Right.
I truly believe that if you pursue that, just excellence as a screenwriter, as a craft person, and then if you're an artist, it's going to come out in anything you do, no matter what.
Right.
So don't worry about the art part. Figure out how to tell a story and where the boxes are, and then what you put into those boxes is going to be uniquely you. I had just, this was like 1989. I had stopped writing for a while because I wasn't succeeding at it. It was getting really depressing and disappointing.
You're a self-taught writer.
Self-taught. There was, at the
Okay.
time, there wasn't any way to learn it except for reading scripts if you could get your hands on them.
Gotcha.
I think I spent 3 years. What I would have spent in graduate school, I just spent teaching myself to write the same screenplay over and over again until it felt right. And then once it felt right intuitively, then some books started coming out, and I started learning the names for the stuff that I had already sort of organically learned.
Okay.
Like, okay, you know, most of it is how to keep it moving and what keeps the story moving. And you find, you know this, and anybody who's been through this knows this, that whether you know you got to hit something on page 25 or you don't know it, whether you read it in a book or you come to it yourself, stories don't work unless something happens on page 3, page 10, page 25.
Of course.
I mean, they just don't work unless we're coded, you know. I mean, we each have a 10-digit phone number, and you can know all the numbers in somebody's phone number. If you don't get them in the right order, you're not going to get them on the phone. And you can sit and bitch about how it's not spiritual to have a number, but you got to get it. You have to communicate, you know, to the whole planet now. It's not just, you know, a domestic market, and maybe we'll pick up some stuff internationally. People are making decisions now based on what's going to play all over the world. So interestingly enough, a question I asked like right before I got the idea was how can I make two people walk out of a movie theater in Finland holding hands? And up until then, Geoffrey, my whole thing, because, you know, your teens and 20s and 30s, you buy into the thing about this is about getting rich and famous.
Right.
And it just says, when you're going to be rich and famous this way, and you buy into it, and you think that this is about getting your name in newspapers and having magazines and people stopping you and all the things that they make you think this is about. And that wasn't working. I was getting better as a writer, but I wasn't getting anywhere in life really. But when I switched that question to how do I get two people who walk out of a movie theater in Finland holding hands, somehow I knew if you get that, you work backwards from that, and you've got everything. Because I don't know why I picked Finland, but now the same moment has to play in Thailand as it does in Finland, as it does in Turkey, as it does in Columbus, Ohio. And to do that, you got to get universal about stuff. And
Yeah.
So right before I wrote Sleepless, I had a business, and I sold my business, and I gave myself a year to write 3 screenplays. And the first one was a buddy comedy, but it had a Cold War element to it.
Oh.
And I wrote it during the autumn of '89, and the Cold War ended. Like, I pressed fade out, and then the Berlin Wall came down. So I went, oh, we're done.
Yeah.
But instead of saying, what more proof do you need that you don't belong doing this? Because it's all down to the questions we ask. So I had failed and failed and failed for years. Now I said, that's it. I'm giving everything up, and I'm going to write 3 movies. And the first one took 4 months, and it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And everybody liked it, but nobody's going to make a Cold War movie now that the Cold War's over.
Right.
What I could have figured out at the time, but didn't, was, dude, why don't you just tell the same story, but make it happen in 1962? Because there will always be a Cold War in 1962.
Right.
You
could have wrote it as a period. Yeah.
I could have done it period. The same thing would have played, and it would have been fun. But I didn't get that idea. But I asked a different question. I said, what you learn from this is you're getting better as a writer, obviously, because people were really interested in it. I was getting meetings and stuff, but they weren't going to make that. But my mistake was I hooked something into history and current events. So then I said, I can't do anything that's locked into time anymore. So the next question was, what's timeless? And the answer for me to that was, well, love is timeless. Love stories are timeless. So how do you tell a timeless love story? And I think the way that I did it is I probably was raised more on those 40s and 50s romantic comedies and love stories. My mom was a big tearjerker fan. She loved like Waterloo Bridge.
Cary Grant and all that.
Yeah, where you had to make people feel all that sexual tension and all that sexual energy without showing sex.
Without showing it. Oh man, what a great point.
And I sort of, the combination of growing up in an era where you didn't see movies that went any further than that one button. He'd look at her, she'd look at him, they'd sip a drink, they'd look at the bed. The next thing you're seeing curtains going and
that's a good point.
Music, and that's it. That plus just the absolute squeamish hatred of writing sex scenes. So I can't stand doing that. I never really successfully
It can be awkward. I totally understand where you're coming from with that. So you wanted to write, a rom-com or a romantic drama, but you weren't interested in, we don't need to show flesh. Now, what I really find interesting though, is it sounds like what set you on fire to write this was the inherent challenge yourself. You challenged yourself to step up, and how do I make people hold hands in Finland? And that sounds like it really kind of lit that torch for you.
It did, because then it became about the audience. Then it became about ask not what the audience can do for you, but what you can do for the audience. It really, it changed the whole paradigm of what I was doing, how I was doing it, why I was doing it. Because I love to throw something out into the future and go like, wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
So the idea of getting 2 people to walk out of a movie theater in Finland holding hands, like, how do I do that? And I didn't start out by saying there isn't going to be any sex or isn't going to, that's just kind of came out of who I am and how I write. And I guess I was writing Sleepless is a 40s love story.
But what I could say about Sleepless in Seattle, and about your writing, is it is incredibly nuanced for the genre, right? So rom-coms aren't known for their subtext, but this film, there's a scene where Meg Ryan's character Annie, she's falling for Tom Hanks's character, even though she's never met him, right? And then she wants to track him down. This is pre-Facebook, so she can't just go cyber stalk him. She wants to track him down. So she goes into Rosie O'Donnell's office, who's her boss, and she says something to the gist of, I think I need to write a story about somebody. And then Rosie O'Donnell's character says, well, you might have to leave then. And there's just
Yeah.
that awesome subtext of I'm supporting user friend, but we're not saying it on the nose. And that's beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to have to give credit to Nora and Delia for that one. I think I handled it differently, but the cool thing is that when you do this and when you do structure,
Yeah.
That scene had to happen, but it didn't have to happen that way. And that's something writers, especially emerging, breaking in, it doesn't even matter. You can have 4 Oscars and still get kicked off your own movie if somebody's whim says so. So the important thing is that when you know structure, like one of the most famous scenes in Sleepless is when Rita Wilson is describing an affair to remember, and she's sitting in the chair and
what a great scene.
Okay, but that wasn't in the script, and that would never be in a script because that's like a 4-page scene with a supporting character.
Yeah.
And you don't have that kind of real estate when you're writing the script. But things happen and they saw these possibilities. And so, Rita goes off on that thing, and it became one of the 2 funniest scenes. And the other one, I guess, is with Rob Reiner in the clam place, one of the 2 funniest scenes. And they weren't scripted. They were things that came out of doing it. But
so like improv on the spot.
Yeah, but
wow.
Structurally, what had to happen in that scene and what happened from my very first draft through every other iteration to the final thing you saw, what had to happen in that scene was around that table, Rita's character had to find out that Tom's character was dating again and that this person had gotten in touch with him. That's, if you did an index card on the wall, that's the scene where that happens. Give it to 100 writers, and 100 writers will write the scene differently. So what I did writing it, was knowing that if you do this right structurally, no matter what they do, they can't pull out the foundation.
No,
they can't pull out the supporting wall. So I wasn't, that scene completely surprised me when I saw a test screening because I didn't know it was coming, and I was howling with laughter.
Oh, it's a great scene.
And so a love story, the first thing you have to know is what's going to keep 2 people apart.
Yeah.
And what was wrong with so many romantic comedies was that any of them that were contemporary, you can always do stuff in period. Religion can keep people apart, or your parents' permission can keep people apart. But in the modern era, 2 people want to get together and the chemistry's there. They're going to figure out a way.
Right.
So I got very frustrated because I kept doing all they meet cute and then they bicker for 60 pages and then all the typical shit happens. And it drove me crazy. And they were all false. Pretty Woman figured it out when Harry Met Sally figured it out. But outside of those 2, in that era, nobody else has figured it out. It was all just, cookie cutter. And the thing is, it's really hard to do a good romantic comedy, but it's easy to fool people with a mediocre romantic comedy because 2 seconds of charm, and that's enough for a lot of people because they just want it so bad.
I think that, okay, a couple of things, because I got to unpack this a little bit, Jeff. All right. So the fact that you had a couple of scenes in there that allowed for improv, that's a testament to character development, though, because if you have a character that isn't developed really well, an actor doesn't feel like they have that freedom of choice, right, to go out there and create that scene. And your script has some really well-developed characters. They're all unique. They all have their own little personas and bits of comedy that they bring to the story. So, I can totally see how the characters felt that freedom to go there, that's like a huge compliment to writing, I would say. Now, as far as what you're saying about, I lost it. I had it for a second. I'm gonna have to cut this part out, but shoot. Yeah. Okay. So this film, what I was thinking about, you were talking about keeping them apart in a Romeo and Juliet sort of way, but the way that you did it, which I thought was conceptually unique, was the characters never meet, right? And when they do meet, it's like a half a second, but you're still able to run both of those plots simultaneously while keeping the audience engaged. And I have to think, your you're swinging for the fences on an attempt like that, because that is such a hard script to write, but you're able to nail it. And you, I'm surprised that you step. I'm surprised that you were able to come up with a concept like that, because I hadn't really seen it before, and I think it's one of the reasons that really makes Sleepless in Seattle stand out the way it does, even to the point where they kind of copied it with You've Got Mail. Like it was like that unique of a structure.
Well, one person, when I got the idea, there was one movie called a French movie called "And Now My Love" by Claude Lelouch, and he told two completely parallel stories about, and there was no connection at all. There was a spoiled young heiress of a Holocaust survivor who became wealthy making shoes. Because he took the pile of shoes from the concentration camps, and then he made a fortune making shoes. And his spoiled daughter, and then there's some other guy, I forget what his deal was, but they're moving through two completely different movies. And at one point they cross paths in a nightclub, but there's no sense of any.
They're not related.
And there's one scene where early on he puts 3 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and then 30 scenes later she puts 3 lumps of sugar in her coffee, and you sort of forget about all of that. But it's like this really long anti-war diatribe that goes on for like 2 hours. At the very end of the movie, these two people find themselves sitting on an airplane next to each other, and this flight attendant, they give them coffee, and they both say 3 lumps, right?
Yeah.
And then they cut to this shot of their luggage going up the carousel together, and everybody remembers that as the most romantic movie of all time. I saw it in 1975 and was just blown away. And all we remembered was the ending. And so it was hard to get a hold of foreign movies, even 10 years later. So I'm trying to track this thing down even before Blockbuster. And I finally found a copy, and I watched it, and I'm going, this isn't romantic at all. This guy is furious. He's pissed off. But then that ending came.
Yeah.
And I rented the movie after I got the idea for Sleepless, remembering that at least one person had done something like this before. So
of course,
not totally crazy,
right?
But crazy enough. And look, I pitched it, and nobody went for it. They said,
really?
First of all, they said, you can't pull this off. But even if you did, nobody's going to want to buy it, and because actors want to be in scenes together, audiences want to see people in scenes together, publicists want to, everybody that's all the way down the line needs two people to be together to have a love story,
right?
And so I didn't get any kind of a development deal for it or anything, and I said, well, I'm going to write it, and you're going to be wrong,
Well, how did you get Nora Ephron involved then?
Once, I wrote it in '90. Sold like Memorial Day of 1990. Then I started doing rewrites, and that process was going along. They got a director named Nick Castle, and I did a rewrite with him. Then I think it was just the style of the day. They hired somebody else who just destroyed it, and then they came back to me, and I brought it back. Then they were ready to go, but they were concerned about the sentimentality of it, and they were concerned it just wasn't funny enough. It was
because it deals with death, loss of a loved one.
It deals with death, and my script was, I wrote it with Kevin Costner and Meg Ryan in mind. So I had less of a humorous, dry comedy, dry funny the whole way through, and it wasn't sad or maudlin. Those laugh out loud scenes weren't in it, but there was a lot of laughter through and through.
Some levity in there.
They were scared, so they wanted more comedy.
Oh.
But rather than say, let's get this guy, just say, make it funnier, they're getting nervous, so you need names. I mean, it's just all there was to it. So David Ward came on, he wrote The Sting, and he kind of wrote a sideways draft. He kept it alive. He convinced them that yes, you can do this. You need to keep them apart until the very end. And they hired Nora because of Nora's, comedy chops and her
huge name.
We're sort of like Lennon and McCartney that way. Like I had all this innocence and sentimentality, and then she comes in with that battery acid, the cynical part, the streetwise part of love. I had the goofy romantic part of love, and she had the streetwise part, and that was a great mix.
It worked out.
So her draft came in, and I got to tell you, the only people that weren't crazy about it were the director, Nick Castle, and me, because I saw there's a lot of stuff that isn't in the movie that was in the script, and thank God it wasn't in the movie, because it didn't belong in the movie. We were going, what the hell is he doing here? But Nick got fired, got paid off, and then Nora got bumped up to director, and then thank God, because Nora is who talked Tom Hanks into doing it.
Nice.
It was going to be very hard to get a star to do a sentimental. This is 1990, now 1992.
Yeah.
And the idea of a guy talking to a radio psychologist was still something that most male leading actors didn't want to do, because it was seen as weak and soft. So she talked Tom into doing it, and that's where history began. He did a lot of his own. That phone call, he added a lot of his own stuff into it, and the scene that meant the most to me, the nightmare scene, where his kid wakes up from a nightmare calling for his mother.
Powerful.
That was very close to the scene I wrote, but he and the kid made that their own, which is what they're supposed to do. I wasn't in there talking about heaven and stuff, but I thought let's stay away from that.
Yeah.
Let's just and interestingly enough, I was on a radio show, and like a live drive time show in DC, and I guess the screener wasn't really on top of it. So I get somebody on the radio, like live, and says, well, I really like that nightmare scene. And I went, thank you very much. He says, well, why don't you talk about Jesus? And I said, well, as soon as you put a name on it, then everybody who's not that is going to be
That's a good
from
point.
it. So why? And he said, then he comes out and says, do you believe that Jesus Christ was your personal savior, and was he the Son of God? This is on
a radio
live
show.
Radio. And
you got put on the spot.
I somehow had it that day. I said, I think we're all the Son of God, but Jesus acted like it. And then they cut the guy off.
Yeah.
And but that's the thing. I tried to avoid. I didn't want to put a name or a label on anything.
No, I think that's smart.
Let people do that themselves. But I had a great conversation with Tom Hanks about that moment.
Yeah.
And I had a talk with him, and then I wrote him a note. Then he sent me a nice note back about. He talked about like the night before he did that scene, that he was concerned about it. And I've been working with actors for a really long time, but I never thought, do they worry about that scene in the morning?
Oh yeah.
So he was going, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And he said, when something's true, it's easy to play. You just play the truth. And that was such a compliment, because that's what with screenwriters, you wrote the book. All the stuff we have to do is so technical, and so 55 different departments have to read this thing and pull out from it what they need. Yet you still have to deliver an emotional reading experience.
I know.
And you can't screw around with stuff that isn't true.
I totally agree. And that dealing with death and loss and not putting a label on it, I think is great, because whoever's watching it is subjectively going to assign whatever they're believing anyway. So leave it up for whatever their impression is. And you talked about the fact that you didn't want to deal with the maudlin as far as that kind of a tone with the fact that this guy lost his wife, right? And I thought I really respected that, because we come into him early in the film. He's lost his wife. He's dealing with it. He's at work, and a guy gives him a card for a psychiatrist, and then he pulls out like 15 cards and starts naming them. I was like, what a brilliant way to show a character who is struggling inside, who is trying to keep it together, who is still a nice guy, right? But we still show that he's fed up. I mean, I thought it's an awesome intro to a character. And then to juxtapose that, right? Like, this is a guy who's trying to keep it together, but maintaining that kind of normalcy, outwardly appearance. And then you're going to juxtapose that with Bill Pullman's character, right? Who on the exterior is a complete mess with like a million allergies and has to have a sleeping machine, all these other things. And I thought, what awesomely diametrically opposed characters. And then you have Meg Ryan in between both of them.
What's interesting is that, again, with the girl that Tom goes out with, and with Walter, with Bill Pullman, um, the movie works, and I love it for how it works. I had a slightly different. I didn't have a Walter that had allergies and any of that kind of buffoonery or anything. I
Right.
wanted these people to be really, really viable.
Okay.
Walter was going to be fine, and Victoria on the other side was going to be fine. But where the tension was going to come in this thing was the audience was going to play Cupid and know
Yes.
that don't do it.
They're not
don't
right.
do it.
Yeah.
That they're, the threat, the villain in this movie is the United States of America, 3,000 miles wide, and there's no real way at that time for two people across the country to know each other. There's nothing connecting anything. There's a radio show so the sneezing, and that, if it gets too far, you're wondering what's she doing with the guy,
Right.
So I wanted him to be somebody that almost anybody in the audience would, marry him. And Victoria, in the West Coast, she's fine.
She's a normal person. Yeah.
Well, but I just want the audience to be going, do not do this. There's somebody better.
But I respect that about writing a character like Walter or Victoria, because the easy way to do this, the typical way to do this, and I dare say the way it would be done now, is that Walter would be abusive or extremely narcissistic or have some real toxic masculine traits about him that were obvious, or and vice versa with Victoria, right? But you wrote supporting characters that are entirely normal, they're entirely likable, they're not bad people, and even when Meg Ryan breaks up with Walter, he's chill about it. He gets it. And that is so difficult to pull off, but it was nailed in this script and in this film.
Got to thank Frank Capra and probably Preston Sturgis for a lot of that, because I'm not any film intellectual or anything, but I did see a lot of Capra films in college as part of a course, and a couple of Preston Sturgis films. And what I got from them, first of all, was just this boundless love for America, and this boundless love for people, even though you know what they're capable of. Just that optimism. That the funny thing is, Capra was an immigrant. He wasn't born here, but he was one of those, became more American than Americans. And the other thing that they did was every person in every one of their stories had a life. The doorman, the bicycle delivery person, they're all heroes of their own movie.
Nice.
And they're all walking around. So so many romantic comedies you'll see, to an extent, Notting Hill, which is just as close to perfect as you can be in terms of setting up an airtight romantic comedy. The whole thing about the friends, the one thing he couldn't avoid doing, where all the friends only exist to make sure that the most handsome or prettiest one falls in love. So Hugh Grant's got all his friends that want to make sure he's this is the most eligible guy in the world, and they're making sure he has love. But in all the supporting characters are only there to make sure that the main character gets love. And screw that, they're there to get their own lives together. And so then you have the Bechdel rule, which two women should not be talking about a guy.
Right.
So my daughter made me aware of that. So I'm doing a series now called Tiny Houses. It's first season's 8 episodes, and I'm writing all 8 before I even show it to anybody. But I made a promise to her: there will be no scene in this entire 8-episode romantic comedy, it's 250 pages, where two women are talking about a guy.
Right. Yeah, the Bechdel test is definitely something to.
And yet, all that information that the two women talk about has to come out some other way, or we're not going to know certain things. So she made me just up the standard, raise the bar higher and higher and higher. How do you do this when everybody else in the world did it this way?
Right.
How do you do this without having two women talk about it? And it's been really fun. It's been really. Initially, I started out, there's going to be one scene. I used to say to her, Jenny, I can't do a romantic comedy where they don't. I mean, come on, I can throw in a scene for you. But not only now, I've done every scene that way, but I have a main character named Shirley Bechdel, which is for the Bechdel. So I'm
You're having fun.
Actually,
You're having fun with it now.
actually, she has a scene where she plays an older woman who's very protective of her grandson who's grown, and our main character's, was his childhood love, and now she's come back to break his heart and ruin his life. And Shirley's very, very protective. And that scene in The Graduate where Anne Bancroft gets in the car with Dustin Hoffman and says "drive." So I copied that scene. So they're driving around in a golf cart, and now you got like a Shirley MacLaine kind of person and a Amy Adams kind of in the same thing.
Yeah.
And Shirley's very protective, and Amy says, "Well, I guess this is about Mike." And then Shirley goes off on this whole thing. Do you think two women? Why would you assume it's about Mike? Do you think two women could possibly have a conversation that doesn't involve a man? And she just beating the shit out of her. Like, no, I didn't mean it this way. I didn't mean it.
Yeah,
because we
that's
do have
funny.
other things. I'm interested in Korean cooking. I'm interested in this.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. And she goes, okay. At the end of the ride, she takes her where she's going. She gets out of this golf cart and she says, "I don't want you seeing Mike," and drives away.
Yeah.
So I got them both. I did a whole scene
There you go.
about two women not talking about a guy because one assumed that that's what they would do, and at the end she just says, "Stay away from my grandson." So it's always, you got to find these little challenges.
Yeah.
You sit here and do this for 35 or 40 years. You have got to find those little ways to raise the bar and keep yourself entertained. So anybody else will be.
Well, how surprised were you to find out that Oscar nominated screenplay?
The weird part was, it was interesting. It was like, 5 a.m. out here.
Yeah.
And the night before, my wife at the time, we were both up all night, but at different parts of the night. So we didn't know that we were both up all night.
Gotcha.
But we both sort of showed up in front of the TV at 5 a.m. And what got me was that, wildly enough, 30 years to the day. So the nominations came out, February 9th, 1994.
Okay.
February 9th, 1964 was the day the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan for the first time. And like everybody else on the planet, in America anyway, I looked at that thing and said, I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
I said, whatever that is, that's what I want for my whole life, just to be in that loop of just complete insane joy and exuberance. And whatever that was, I wanted it. And I made decisions, and now here it is 30 years later to the day, and I have a movie that could possibly get nominated. And I think I'd already gotten a Writers Guild nomination by then. So
that's
awesome. It was possible. And there's 5, and I'm doing this because they showed our logos up at an arc, and Dave was second or third, and that's a romantic comedy. And again, airtight. What a wonderful, wonderful movie. And I knew by the rules, first of all, to get any romantic comedy in an Oscar nomination is not likely.
Right.
So I thought when they mentioned Dave that we're shot. And also Groundhog Day came out that year.
Wow.
So did Mrs. Doubtfire. And What's Eating Gilbert Grape wasn't necessarily a romantic comedy, but that was like a big buzzy
yeah,
movie.
That was a drama. Yeah. So
it came down to 4. And the last one was empty. So I thought, well, that's it. And then we were the last one. And my wife and I just both screamed so loud that
awesome.
I don't know why cops didn't come. It was just,
that's so cool.
We screamed our asses off. My mom called, and it was an amazing day. I think it was like 3 p.m. before I could finally get out and walk the dog.
Oh, I bet you were running hot all day.
It was how can I describe it? And the time between the announcement and the Oscars was a lot longer than it is now. I think it was like 6 weeks.
Okay.
So you're just walking around for 6 weeks going, I gotta win it. And then you drive yourself crazy with well, this is actually, it says original screenplay. All these movies were good, but none of them were more original than A Love Story Where the People Don't Meet. So I would just torture myself with, Nora's got such a cachet that maybe we'll get in on that. But they gave it to the piano, which is all the other writers in our group. We knew 2 things. One, that's a shitty script. And 2, and two, she's gonna win. We knew, it. I can't say anything bad about the movie. It didn't do anything for me, but I know it did for a lot of people. So I don't want to take anything down.
Right.
As an emotional experience, it really delivered. As a script, you could drive 747s through the holes in that script, and as writers, we were really offended, but we knew, and either one of us would have begrudged the other one to win,
No,
in the line of
line
of fire and Days and Philadelphia, come on, you guys deserve,
of course.
all of us knew that she did not deserve that Oscar for screenwriting, maybe directing, and so we knew this sucks and it's going to win. So we sort of had this kind of relaxed thing that night.
Gotcha.
And it's a pretty strange experience, but part of it is you're at the taping of a TV show, like what everybody's watching.
Of course, yeah, you got to put the face on.
You're just at another TV show being taped, and by that time you've been to 100 TV shows being taped, and so you're watching all this stuff, and then your category comes, and you realize that your whole life is coming down like the next 30 seconds, and 8 rows away from this thing, I had a long walk at this thing happened. Wow. And you never know what you're going to say or what you're going to do. And I just, right before this thing happened, I came into this area of calm where I said, whatever happens, I'm going to be fine. But cool. They didn't do it. So for the rest of the night, I just kept elbowing the guys on our row saying, when are they going to do our category? And I just kept it going, and the weirdest thing is that because this country and the way things are set up, I drove home that night feeling like I lost something.
Oh, I think an Oscar nomination is a huge
it was incredible,
thing. Yeah, absolutely.
People know more about it now, but they have that the nominees luncheon at the Beverly Hilton every year.
Yeah.
If it could have ended there, that is the coolest day in your life. Just walking around this giant, ballroom and tables and everything, and you got your little sticker that says who you are and what you're there for. And there's press, but all the press is friendly because you might be an Oscar winner and they need you. And you're just walking around. I know there's Spielberg and there's Tom and there's Lawrence Fishburne, and everybody's an Oscar nominee, and we're just floating that day. And awesome. It was and if they would have ended it there, just said, these are the 5 best. These are the 5 best. I think we all would have been happy, but America needs a show. You got to have
they got to do the show.
And the thing is, you can't. It's just because you didn't lose anything. You won.
It's
you
huge.
Wrote one of the 5 best.
It's amazing.
And yet, the way it's set up, I drove home with this kind of empty feeling of it's all over.
Well, it's political too, though. It's political too.
And then God, but it the funny thing was, in that 6 weeks, my kids were like 8 and 4, 9 and 5 at that point, and we were getting fruit baskets for coming every day for weeks. I would open the front door, we'd have to kick these fruit baskets out of the way, and they knew enough to know. They didn't have any perspective, but they knew some big award's about to happen and mom and dad are going down, and I said, here's how you're going to know. If there are fruit baskets tomorrow, I won. If there are no fruit baskets tomorrow, I didn't win. And they stopped on a dime, no fruit basket. So that's just the way of the world. But it was a blast. I want to do it again. So I'm adapting my book now to see if I can get in there again in the other category.
What's the name of the novel?
It's called Attachments.
Attachments.
And,
okay.
It's a boarding school story. Three kids who used to go to school together are called back 20 years later when a teacher on his deathbed asks for them, and they don't know why.
Awesome.
So everybody, it's a chickens come to home to roost kind of story where secrets don't stay secret. They're not meant to.
And this is a novel that people can purchase right now.
Oh yeah. Here's a picture of it. If you're doing this video, there it is.
Yeah, I've got video. All right. And they can find it on what? Amazon or your website?
Amazon, my website, Amazon, books. I mean, your bookstore will have it if you call them. I don't know if they have them all in stock. But if anybody's going to buy it online, bookshop.org, they support independent bookstores. So you do have to pay shipping. But if you get it from them, you designate like your favorite independent bookstore, and they've raised millions of dollars to help
that's
keep,
cool.
indie bookstores in business. Like, I guess the Bodhi Tree is gone now, but all our favorite bookstores, you can help keep them alive by buying stuff through Bookshop.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Jeff, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your perspective on screenwriting, and Sleepless in Seattle is just awesome. And just getting any tidbits from you. Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked?
I don't know. We could, we said this privately. We can go on for days. So
that's not how we said it, but yeah, that's he said we could talk about this shit all day. And
that's what I said. We can
that's
talk about
accurate.
This shit all day. So we'll have a podcast, Geoffrey, called "We Can Talk About This Shit All Day."
Oh, that's hysterical.
We can't. No, I mean, in the end, the thing is, if anybody listening or watching has questions, find me on Facebook or something. I'm trying to make a point out of being, as accessible as I possibly can be.
Yeah, and I can even look at having you come back on the show, and we could do like a Q&A or something.
I'd be happy to, because
that's awesome.
I wasn't born into Hollywood royalty. I had to elbow my way in, which is how most of us have to do it. So I don't want to say if I can do it, you can do it, but I'm saying if you're willing to do 100% of who you are into this, that's your best chance.
I respect your game, sir.
Thank you.
All right, a lot. Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Take care, Jeff.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media, where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.